The night was cold and the street was empty. Only broken lights flickered above the road, making shadows dance on the walls. The human walked slowly, his jacket pulled tight, his boots echoing on the cracked ground. He had finished a long day of work and wanted nothing more than rest. But the city never truly slept, and sometimes the city gave strange surprises. As he turned a corner, he heard a sound. It was soft, almost lost in the wind, a weak cry like a kitten. He stopped, listening carefully, his heart beating faster. The sound came again, thin, shaky, and filled with pain. It was not an animal, it was a voice, a very small voice. He followed the sound and walked into an abandoned market street. Shattered glass covered the ground. Stalls stood empty, forgotten. A faint blue glow moved between the shadows, and then he saw her. A tiny alien girl, no older than 7 by human eyes, sitting against a broken wall. Her skin shimmered faintly with pale light. Her silver hair was tangled. Her small hands clutched an empty cup. Her eyes, wide and glowing like stars, lifted to him in fear and hope. She whispered only one word. Milk. The human froze, shocked by the sight. What was a child, an alien child, doing alone in this place? Why did she ask only for milk? He looked around quickly, expecting a trap. But the street was silent, only the wind and the trembling figure before him. He took a step closer. The girl flinched, curling into herself. Her body was thin, her clothes torn and dirty. Her lips were dry, her voice almost gone. Yet her eyes never left his face, desperate and pleading. Milk, she whispered again, weaker this time. The human knelt slowly so he would not frighten her. He saw the way she shook, as if her small body could not fight the cold. He opened his bag, but he had nothing, only tools. Nothing a child could drink. The helplessness hit him hard. For a moment he thought of leaving. It was not his problem. He was tired, poor, and already carrying his own burdens. But as he looked at her, he felt something stir inside him. Those glowing eyes were not just asking for milk. They were begging for life. He sighed, his breath white in the night air. Come with me, he whispered softly. But the girl did not move. She hugged her empty cup tighter, as if afraid he would take even that away. Her tiny shoulders shook as she whispered again. Milk. The human stood up and looked around. A small shop was open at the far end of the street. He could see the faint light, smell the warmth of food. He turned back to the girl. He stretched out his hand, not touching her, only waiting. For a long time she stared at it, her eyes shining. Finally, her little fingers let go of the cup and reached out. She touched his hand, weak but trusting, and in that moment, the empty street felt less lonely. He pulled her gently to her feet, her legs shaking but her spirit holding. As they walked, the city around them seemed darker. Every shadow looked like it was watching. Every corner felt dangerous. He knew this was not simple. A child like her, alone at night, glowing with strange marks. There was a story here. A dangerous one. The girl stumbled, and he quickly caught her. She leaned against him. Small and fragile, her voice came again, softer now, almost like a prayer. Milk, he nodded firmly. Yes, little one. Milk. They reached the shop door. The warm light spilled out, but the human hesitated. People inside would see her. They would whisper, maybe even call someone. He looked at her once more, at her eyes filled with fear and need, and he knew he could not turn away. He pushed the door open. The bell above rang, sharp and loud. Heads turned, eyes landed on the strange pair. The human stood tall, protecting the girl who hid behind his leg. The room filled with murmurs, but he walked to the counter and said firmly, "A cup of warm milk." The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow, staring at the alien child, but the human's voice was strong, his eyes hard. The milk was poured, steam rising. He took it and knelt before the girl. She looked at it as if it was the most precious treasure in the universe. Her hand shook as she held the cup. She sipped slowly, her lips trembling, and then, for the first time, her face softened. Her small glow brightened as if life had returned to her body. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She whispered, not just in hunger this time, but in something deeper. Thank you. The human felt a weight on his chest. He had thought it would end here, just milk for a lost child. But when she reached out and held his sleeve tightly, refusing to let go, he realized the night had only begun, and the empty street had given him a story far bigger than he imagined. The little alien girl sat close to the human, holding the cup with both hands. The steam from the warm milk rose in the air, filling the shop with a soft smell. Her lips touched the edge of the cup and she sipped carefully. It was almost as if the warmth was too much for her fragile body. But with every small sip, her shivering slowed, her glow returned, and her breathing calmed. The human watched her quietly. Something about her silence pulled at his heart. She did not speak more than a word or two, only sipped as though the drink was her lifeline. People inside the shop continued staring, whispering in low voices. Some shook their heads, others looked away with fear. To them, she was not a child but a strange creature. Maybe trouble, maybe danger. The shopkeeper leaned on the counter, his eyes narrow. "You should not bring her here," he said under his breath. The human frowned. "She is just a child." But the man shook his head. "Not a child, not one of us. Better leave her outside before others see." The human clenched his fists, but he said nothing. He looked back at the girl, her small hand still trembling on the cup. She had closed her eyes as she drank, as if she finally felt safe for the first time. He lowered his voice, leaning closer to her. "What is your name?" he asked gently, but she only shook her head, her silver hair falling over her face. She finished the milk and licked her lips softly. Her eyes lifted to him again, glowing like tiny moons, and she whispered, "More." The human's chest tightened, not because of the word, but because of the way she said it. It was not greed, not demand, it was desperation. As if this one cup was the first real food she had tasted in days. He nodded slowly. "All right, one more." The shopkeeper groaned but poured another cup. The human paid quickly, avoiding his sharp looks. He gave the cup to the girl and she drank even slower this time. She seemed afraid it might vanish if she rushed. Each sip was like a small treasure, and with every sip, she pressed herself closer to the human. As if the milk alone was not enough, she needed the safety of his presence too. He felt the weight of her small head lean against his arm. The warmth of her glow touched his skin like faint light. She did not look at anyone else in the room, only at him. Her trust was sudden, fragile but real, and in her glowing eyes, he saw something that shook him, not just hunger, but longing, a deep ache for connection. When the second cup was empty, he tried again. "Where are your parents?" The girl froze, her glow dimmed. Her little hand squeezed the empty cup until her knuckles turned pale. She did not answer. Instead, she whispered again, her voice trembling. "Don't. Leave." The words pierced him deeper than any weapon could. He swallowed hard, looking around the shop. Strangers still stared, whispering about him, about her, but he no longer cared. He placed the empty cup on the counter and stood. "Come," he said softly, reaching out his hand again. This time she did not hesitate, her tiny fingers wrapped around his. Cold but steady, they stepped back into the night. The city was darker now, the broken lamps buzzing weakly. The streets stretched empty, but every corner felt alive with eyes. The girl held his hand tightly. Almost too tightly, her steps were small, but she refused to let go. The human kept glancing at the shadows. Something inside told him they were not alone, that someone somewhere was watching, waiting. He pulled his jacket around her, trying to keep her warm. Her glow lit up faintly against the fabric. For a moment it almost looked like she belonged there, like a small light meant to shine in his dark life. She leaned against him, her voice soft, almost like a secret. "You, stay." Her words were broken, but her meaning was clear. The human felt the weight of a choice pressing on him. He had only wanted to help her for a moment, just give her milk, but now she wanted something more. Not food, not shelter, but him. Her eyes told him everything. She had no one else. Nowhere else to go, and for reasons he could not understand. She had chosen him. They walked until they reached his small apartment at the edge of the district. He hesitated at the door. He had lived alone for years. Walls silent, air cold. Now he stood there with a child who looked at him as if he was her whole world. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. She followed closely, never letting his hand go. The room was dark, plain, filled with nothing but old furniture and tools. But when the girl entered, it felt different. Her glow touched the walls, making the shadows retreat. She sat down on the floor, hugging her knees, looking around carefully. Finally, she looked up at him and whispered one last time, "Thank you." The human sat down slowly across from her, his chest heavy with questions, his mind storming with doubt. Who was she? Why was she alone? Why did she trust him so easily? But one thing he knew for sure. This was no ordinary night. The warm cup had not ended her story. It had only begun something far greater, something he could no longer walk away from. The night grew colder as the human closed the door to his small apartment. The girl sat quietly on the floor. Her glowing skin dim but steady. She had finished the milk. But her eyes still clung to him, every time he moved. Her gaze followed as if afraid he would vanish. The silence inside the room was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the city outside. The human placed a blanket near her. "You can rest here," he said gently. She touched the fabric carefully, as if it was something rare. Then she wrapped herself inside, her small body almost disappearing. For the first time that night, her breathing slowed, her eyes closing halfway. But the human could not rest. Something about this child made his heart restless. He walked to the window and pulled the curtain slightly. The street outside was empty, or so it seemed. Yet in the distance he caught a flicker of movement, shadows shifting where no wind blew, figures standing too still in the dark. His stomach tightened. Someone was watching. And he knew it was not just curiosity, it was purpose, it was hunt. He closed the curtain quickly, but when he turned back, he found the girl staring at him. Her wide eyes glowing faintly, she whispered, "They follow." His blood froze. She knew. She had felt it too. Maybe even before he did. The human crouched near her, his voice low. "Who are they? Why are they after you?" But she only shook her head violently, hiding her face in the blanket. Her little shoulders trembled, her hands gripping the cloth as if it could shield her from everything. He felt a wave of frustration, but he calmed himself. Pushing too hard would only break the fragile trust between them. Instead, he said softly, "Don't worry. You are safe here." The words were easy, but he knew they were a lie. Because safety was something he could not promise. Not when unknown shadows lurked outside his door. Hours passed. The girl finally curled up on the blanket and drifted into sleep. Her glow dimmed like a fading lamp. The human sat near the door, watching, listening. Every sound outside made his chest tighten. Footsteps in the alley, the rustle of coats, the low murmur of voices carried by the wind. The watchers had not left. They were waiting. Near midnight, a knock came. Sharp, deliberate, echoing through the room. The girl woke instantly, her eyes wide with terror. She scrambled across the floor and clung to his arm, whispering, Don't open." Her voice was shaking, almost broken. The human pulled her behind him. Standing between her and the door, his heart pounded, but he stayed silent. The knock came again, harder this time. Then a voice deep and cold. "Return what is ours." The words chilled his blood. He didn't answer. Instead, he pressed a finger to his lips, telling the girl to stay quiet. The silence stretched for long seconds. Then footsteps retreated slowly into the night, but he knew they would be back. When the room was still again, he sat beside the girl. She looked at him with tears glowing in her eyes. "They take me," she whispered, her words broken. "They mark, they hurt, they use." She stopped, shaking her head, unable to finish. The human's chest burned with anger. Someone had done this to her. Someone thought of her as property. Not a child, he spoke firmly. "No one will take you." The girl blinked at him, her lips trembling. "You stay?" she asked again, her small hand gripping his sleeve tightly. He nodded. "Yes, I'll stay." For the first time, a faint smile touched her face, fragile but real. But deep inside, the human knew the truth. This was not over. The shadows would return, and next time, they would not just knock, they would break the door. He had no plan, no weapon, only his will. Yet, as he looked at the tiny alien girl clinging to him, he knew one thing for certain: he would fight even if he had nothing, even if the whole city turned against him. He would not let her go, outside, unseen in the dark. The watchers whispered to each other. Their glowing eyes flickered. Their armor gleamed faintly under the broken lights. One of them spoke. "She cannot hide, not even with him." Another replied coldly, "Tomorrow, we take her back." And the night grew heavier with the promise of danger. The human closed his eyes for only a moment, but his mind refused to rest. The secret was clear now. The girl was not just lost. She was hunted. Her story was bigger than milk, bigger than hunger. It was survival, it was freedom. And by choosing to give her shelter, he had stepped into her fight. A fight that was only beginning. The morning came slowly. The pale sun struggled to cut through the gray clouds. Inside the small room, silence hung heavy, broken only by the faint sound of the city outside. The human sat against the wall, his eyes tired but awake. The tiny alien girl still slept, curled in the blanket, her glow dim like a candle almost gone. He studied her small frame, noticing how fragile she looked. Every bone showed beneath her skin. Her arms were too thin, her face too hollow for a child. But what caught his attention most was the way she moved in her sleep. Every twitch, every small cry, was filled with fear, as if even her dreams hunted her. When she finally stirred, she rubbed her glowing eyes and looked at him. Her lips parted as if afraid to speak. "Hungry?" she whispered. He nodded quickly and offered her a piece of bread from his bag. She held it carefully like it was treasure, and took small bites. Her hands shook the whole time. But she did not stop eating as she finished. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. But something shifted, the cloth slipped slightly, and for a brief moment he saw her back. The human froze. His breath caught scars, dark, burned symbols marked into her skin. Not random scratches, but sharp lines, patterns like cruel brands. His stomach twisted in anger. Someone had carved those marks into her. Someone had treated her like an object. He tried to stay calm, but the girl had already noticed his eyes on her back. She gasped and pulled the blanket tighter. Her glow dimmed to almost nothing. "Don't look," she whispered in fear. The human's chest ached. He lowered his voice, gentle and steady. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to scare you." But she shook her head, tears spilling from her glowing eyes. "They hurt," she whispered. "They say I belong." To them, her words hit him like a blade. He moved closer, not touching her, but keeping his voice firm. "You belong to no one," he said. "You are not theirs. Not anyone's property." The girl looked at him, searching his face as if she wanted to believe. But years of pain chained her spirit. She pulled the blanket down just a little, revealing one symbol burned deep into her shoulder. Her small voice trembled as she explained, "They mark us so no one can hide, so everyone knows we are owned." The human clenched his fists, his anger burning hotter. Whoever had done this was not just cruel. They were monsters. He wanted to ask more. But the girl suddenly trembled violently. Her small body curled up, her hands covering her face. She whispered again and again, "Don't let them take me. Don't let them take me." The human knelt in front of her. His heart breaking, he reached out slowly and placed a hand on her shoulder. This time she did not pull away. She clung to his sleeve instead, her tears soaking the cloth. "I promise," he said, his voice steady. "No one will take you while I'm here." Her small body shook, but slowly she began to breathe easier. Her glow returned faintly, as if his words gave her a spark of hope. She lifted her face and whispered, "You stay?" He nodded firmly. "I'll stay." But deep inside, he knew the truth. This was more dangerous than he had thought. Those scars were proof. This was no random child lost in the city. She was part of something darker, something that reached beyond his small room by helping her. He had placed himself in the path of those who had marked her. As the day went on, he tried to distract her with small things. He gave her water, let her sit near the window to watch the sky. She pressed her tiny hands against the glass, her glowing eyes wide in wonder. It was as if she had never been allowed to look at the world freely. Her smile was faint, but it was there, and seeing it gave him strength. Still, he could not forget the voices from the night before. "Return what is ours," they had said. Those shadows outside were not gone. He could feel it in his bones. They would return. And when they did, they would not ask politely. They would come with force, and they would not stop until the girl was theirs again. That night, as darkness fell, the girl refused to lie far from him. She pulled the blanket beside where he sat. Her small hand found his sleeve again, holding tight. "Don't leave me," she whispered once more. The human looked at her glowing eyes, so full of fear yet so full of trust, and he made the promise again. Not just in words, but in his heart, "I won't leave you." The room was silent, but outside the city whispered with danger. In the shadows, the hunters waited, their eyes fixed on the little girl, their marks glowing in the dark. And the human knew, the hidden wounds on her back were not just scars of the past. They were warnings of a storm that was still coming. A storm he would now have to face because he had chosen her, and he would not let her go no matter what. The next day began with uneasy silence. The human prepared simple food, but his hands were not steady. He could feel the weight of danger pressing closer. The girl sat by the window, her glowing eyes following every movement outside. She did not speak, but her small body trembled whenever heavy footsteps echoed in the street. By afternoon, the silence broke. Armored figures marched through the alleys, their boots striking the ground like drums of war. People whispered and hid behind doors. Everyone knew who they were, hunters sent to claim what they believed was theirs. And today they were searching with purpose. The human pulled the curtain quickly. His heart thudded in his chest as he turned to the girl. She was already clutching his sleeve. Her lips pale. "They come," she whispered, her voice shaking. He nodded, trying to hide his own fear. "Yes, I know," he said, "but I won't let them take you." A sharp knock thundered on the door. The girl gasped, pressing herself against him. The human stayed silent, his breath held, but the knock came again, harder, shaking the walls. Then a voice, cold and commanding. "Give us the marked one, and we will leave you unharmed." The human clenched his fists, anger rising. She was not an object, not a thing to be handed over, he whispered to the girl. "Stay close," and grabbed his old coat. He knew staying inside was a trap. They would break in sooner or later. They had to run now before the walls closed in. He opened the back window quietly. The girl hesitated, her eyes wide. But when he lifted her gently and helped her through, she clung to him tightly. The alley behind the building was narrow. Filled with shadows, he stepped down carefully, holding her hand as they slipped into the darkness. The street outside roared with boots and voices. The hunters were close, their glowing helmets turning side to side, scanning. The human pulled the girl into a side passage. Every step felt like thunder in his ears. Every corner felt like it hid eyes waiting to strike. "Faster," he whispered. The girl's small legs struggled, but she never let go of his hand. Her glow was faint, barely visible under the heavy coat he wrapped around her. But to him, she felt like a light leading him through the dark. Suddenly a shout rang out. "There!" In the alley. The human's heart raced. The hunters had seen them. He grabbed the girl in his arms and ran. His boots slammed against the stone ground. Behind him, the sound of armored feet grew louder. The hunters shouted orders, their voices echoing like iron. The girl buried her face against his chest, whispering in fear, "Don't let them take me. Don't let them take me." He pushed forward, turning corner after corner. The city became a maze of broken walls and narrow paths. Every turn was desperate, every breath sharp. But no matter how fast he ran, the hunters stayed close. They were trained. Strong and relentless, at last he burst into an open square. The air hit his face like ice. Shops stood around. People scattered in fear as they saw the chase. The hunters entered right behind, weapons gleaming. "Stop!" one of them shouted, but the human kept running, his arms burning, his lungs on fire. The girl lifted her head, her glowing eyes wide with terror. "They never stop," she cried softly. He looked down at her and spoke between breaths. "Then neither do we." He spotted a broken stairway leading to the rooftops. Without thinking, he rushed to it, climbing fast. The steps cracked under his weight. But he pushed on. The hunters roared below, chasing, climbing. The rooftop stretched before him, endless and dangerous, but it was the only way. The human ran across the roof, tiles slipping under his boots. The wind cut through the air. The girl held on tight, her small arms wrapped around his neck. Behind him, the hunters spread out like wolves. Their armor clanged, their heavy bodies closing in. One of them leapt forward, grabbing at his coat. The human twisted, barely escaping. The hunter slipped, crashing onto the tiles, but others came. The chase thundered across the rooftops. Every step a gamble between life and death. Finally, he spotted an old bridge connecting two buildings. It was thin, cracked, but it was a chance. He ran for it, his breath burning. The girl's glowing eyes met his, full of fear but also trust. He whispered, "Hold on," and dashed across. The bridge shook under their weight, creaking like it would collapse, but somehow they made it. The hunters stopped at the edge, their glowing helmets glaring across the gap. For a moment, the city was silent. The human stood on the far side. Clutching the girl, he raised his voice, trembling but strong. "She is not yours." The hunters said nothing, but their silence was a promise. This was not the end. The human turned quickly, carrying the girl into the shadows of another street. His body ached, his legs shook, but he knew he could not stop. Not yet, not until they were truly safe. The girl lifted her head, tears glowing on her cheeks. Her voice was small but full of truth. "You fight for me," she whispered. The human looked at her, his chest heavy. "Yes," he said, his voice firm despite his exhaustion. "I will fight for you." And as the city swallowed them into its dark alleys once more, he knew the chase had only begun. The hunters would return stronger, but so would he. Because this tiny alien girl was no longer just a stranger. She was his to protect, and he would never let her go. The human staggered into a narrow alley, his breath heavy, his chest burning. The girl clung to him tightly, her small arms around his neck, her glow faint but steady. He leaned against the cold wall, listening, waiting. The sound of armored boots echoed in the distance. The hunters were still searching, their voices sharp. Calling to one another for a moment, silence wrapped around them. The human looked down at the girl. Her eyes were wide, tears glowing on her cheeks. "You save me," she whispered. Her voice fragile, but before he could answer, a heavy crash shook the air. The hunters had broken through another building nearby, their search closing in. He tightened his grip on the girl and moved deeper into the alley. The path led them to a dead end, high walls rising before them. He cursed under his breath, trapped. The girl pressed her head against his chest. Trembling, "They come," she whispered. And she was right, the echoes grew louder. Closer, there was no escape, not this time. The hunters appeared from both sides, armored and towering. Their helmets glowed with sharp lights. Their weapons raised, one of them stepped forward. His voice cold, "Human, step aside. She is ours. You cannot win." The human's heart pounded, his hands shaking, but he moved the girl behind him, standing tall despite the fear clawing at his chest. "She is not yours," he said firmly. "She is a child." "Not a thing to own," the hunters laughed. A sound like iron grinding. "She is marked. She was made for us. You will not change that." The girl whimpered softly, clutching the back of his coat. Her tears fell like drops of light on the ground. The human stood frozen. Every instinct screamed at him to give up, to save himself. One word from him and the hunters would leave him alive. But when he turned his head slightly, he saw her eyes. Those glowing eyes filled with fear, with hope, with trust. And he knew the truth, he had no choice. The leader of the hunters stepped closer. "Move," he ordered. The human swallowed hard, his voice rough but steady. "No." The hunters shifted, their weapons humming with power. "You will die for her?" the leader asked. The human's chest rose with each breath, his voice breaking but strong. "If I must," the girl gasped. Pulling on his sleeve, her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "I want you." Her small hands clung to him as if letting go meant death. In that moment, the human felt a fire inside him. Stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. He was not just protecting her, he was choosing her. The hunters roared and charged. The human grabbed a broken metal pipe from the ground. It was no weapon compared to theirs, but it was all he had. He swung with desperation, striking the first hunter across the helmet. The clang echoed, the hunter staggered back. The girl screamed, her glow flaring bright. The light blinded the hunters for a second, enough for the human to strike again, pushing them back, but they were too many, too strong. He was thrown against the wall, pain ripping through his side. The girl cried out, rushing to him, but he pulled her behind him again. "Run!" he shouted. But she shook her head violently, her glowing eyes locked on him. "No, not without you." The hunters raised their weapons, ready to end it. The human stood weak but unbroken, his voice rose like thunder in the narrow alley. "You will not take her." For the first time, the hunters hesitated. His defiance was not strength, but something greater, a will they could not crush. The girl stepped forward suddenly, her small hands raised. Her glow spread across the walls, bright and powerful. The hunters shielded their faces, stumbling. The human realized she was more than they thought. Her light was not just beauty, it was power. A power they had tried to cage, but now it was free. He grabbed her hand and pulled her close. Her glow burned stronger with his touch. Together they faced the hunters, and for the first time, the hunters stepped back. "You cannot keep her forever," the leader growled. The human's eyes blazed with fury. "Watch me," he answered. The hunters retreated slowly, their armor fading into the shadows, but their words lingered like poison. "This is not over. She will never belong to you." The human held the girl close, his heart racing. She buried her face against him, her tears hot. "You choose me," she whispered. He closed his eyes, whispering back, "Always," as the night swallowed the city again. The human knew the battle was only beginning, but his choice was clear, unshakable. He would protect her, fight for her, live or die for her, because in her small voice, in her glowing eyes, he had found something worth more than his own life. He had found family. The night was still, but the human's heart beat like a war drum. He held the tiny alien girl in his arms, her glow faint after the storm of light. They had faced the hunters together, and for now they were safe. But he knew deep inside, this fight was not finished. The shadows would return, stronger, hungrier, unwilling to lose what they believed was theirs. The girl lifted her face slowly, her silver hair falling across her cheeks. Her glowing eyes searched his with fear and hope. "You stay," she whispered, her voice soft. He nodded without hesitation. "I stay." She clung to him tighter, as if those words were the only thing keeping her alive. They walked through the silent streets until they reached the edge of the district. The human's small apartment was no longer safe. Too many eyes had seen. Too many whispers carried through the city. He needed to find somewhere hidden, somewhere the hunters would not dare to enter. But where could a poor man hide from armored hunters with power and reach? The girl tugged at his sleeve. Her eyes flickered toward the broken warehouses near the old river. "Safe there," she said softly. Almost like she remembered, he followed her direction. Carrying her across dark alleys and cracked bridges, every sound made him tense. Every shadow felt like danger. But somehow, they reached the place without being stopped. The warehouse was abandoned, its walls rusted, its doors broken. Yet inside it was quiet, hidden from the busy streets. He laid her down on a blanket he found among old crates. Her glow lit the room faintly, chasing away the heavy dark. She looked at him as if he was her shield, her world. "You fight, for me?" she whispered again. He knelt beside her, brushing her tangled hair gently away from her face. "Yes," he said softly, "and I'll keep fighting, as long as I live." Her tears glimmered as they rolled down. "No one ever say that," she confessed, her voice trembling. "No one choose me, only you." The human felt his chest ache, his anger rise against the unseen monsters who had hurt her. But in her words, he also felt something else. A bond forming. Unbreakable, born of pain but stronger than steel. He held her small hand in his. "You are not theirs. You are not alone anymore. You are mine to protect." She blinked at him, her lips trembling into the faintest smile. "Family?" she asked softly. The human's throat tightened. But he nodded, "Yes, family." For the first time, the girl let out a soft laugh, weak but real. It was the sound of light breaking through heavy clouds. She leaned against him, her glow warming his chest, and in that moment, the warehouse did not feel broken anymore. It felt alive, filled with hope, but outside, the hunters still searched. Their voices carried through the night. "We will find her. We will mark her again. She cannot escape." The human heard the faint echoes, his jaw tightening. He knew the battle was not finished, but something inside him had changed. He was no longer just a tired man trying to survive. He was a shield, a wall, a fire that would not break. The girl slept in his arms at last. Her breathing steady, he stayed awake, watching the broken door. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind, made him grip the pipe he had carried. But his fear was different now. It was not fear of dying, it was fear of losing her. And that fear made him stronger. As dawn crept in, light filling the broken windows, the girl stirred and looked up at him. Her small voice carried a strength it had not before. "You stay forever?" The human smiled faintly, tired but unbroken. "Yes," he said. "Forever." She placed her small glowing hand on his chest. Her eyes softened, her voice barely a whisper. "Then I am safe." And in that moment, he understood. It was not just that she needed him, he needed her too. Her light, her trust, her fragile but fierce spirit had given him purpose in a life that had been empty for so long. The hunters would come again. The city would whisper and watch. The world might turn against them, but none of it mattered. Because the choice had already been made, because the bond between a human and a tiny alien girl had been sealed. Not by blood, not by law, but by something stronger. By love, by trust, by humanity itself. He looked at her as she drifted back into sleep. Her scars still marked her skin, but no longer her spirit. She had found safety, family, and a promise that would never be broken. And he had found something he never thought possible. A reason to fight. A reason to hope, a reason to live. As the sun rose higher, the human whispered to the quiet room. "No one will take you again. Not while I breathe." The girl stirred softly, her glowing eyes opening just enough to meet his, and she whispered back, barely audible but filled with truth. "You are mine." The human held her close, his eyes burning with fire, and in that moment, he knew The tiny alien girl who had once asked only for milk had given him far more. She had given him a bond that nothing in the galaxy could break. And together, they would face whatever storm was coming, not as strangers, not as master and slave, but as family, as two souls bound forever.